Welcome back. In this video, we're going to talk about sorting our arrays. And there's actually just two videos left for this section, this one and the next one. This one's sorting. The next one is going to be a project video where you create a newer version of our expense manager using what we've learned about arrays and arrays of objects. Then we'll move on to the next section where we actually connect all of this to the browser. Now, when it comes to sorting our arrays, depending on what data we're storing, we want to sort by different things. So for a list of notes, we most likely want to sort by the title as opposed to by the body. For a list of to-dos, we probably want to sort by the completed status, putting ones that haven't been completed at the top of the list and ones that have been completed down at the bottom. So with each application, the sorting order is really going to depend on the specific data you're working with. Now, regardless of how you're trying to sort things, the method you use is the same. This is the sort array method. So let's take a look at how this works. To kick things off, I want to pull up the MDN documentation for the sort method, as it's a bit more complex than any of the other array methods we've worked with so far. If we scroll down to the method that's sort, we can check it out. Now, the sort method doesn't require a function as the first argument, though it can take one. For arrays of simple data types, the sort method is just going to try to sort things alphabetically. So right here, for example, we have an array of strings. When we call the sort method, the months array is now a bit different. Instead of going from March, January, February, and December, we have it in alphabetical order with D first, then F, J, and M. So with strings, sort can intuitively figure out that we probably want to sort things alphabetically as opposed to something else like the length of the individual string. But there are plenty of other situations, like with array of objects, where this is not going to actually do much of anything. It's similar to what we saw with index of. Index of worked great with our simpler data types, but when we tried to use index of with objects, it failed. If we tried to use the sort method with an array of objects, it's not going to let us specify the specific criteria we want to sort by. But sort does take a function which allows us to specify the exact comparison behavior. If we scroll down a little bit, we can see that sort takes an optional compare function. This compare function allows us, the developer, to define the sort order. So for the notes, I want to sort alphabetically by the title. For the to-dos, I want to sort the completed items at the bottom of the list, and the ones that haven't been completed, I want those to appear up at the top. Now, there is a bunch of information about how the compare function works, since it can be a little tricky. We're going to go ahead and set it up exploring exactly all of this stuff, but a bit more organically, as opposed to just reading this wall of text. Over in the terminal, I'm going to switch over to Visual Studio Code, and we're going to kick things off by creating a new function for our notes. Const sort notes equals a new function. We're going to take in the notes to sort, and that's it. We don't need anything else. Inside of this function, it's now time to figure out how to use notes.sort. As I mentioned, calling notes.sort isn't going to do anything for our array of objects. What we need to do is provide it a function. This function, also known as the compare function, allows us to determine if one thing should come after or before another thing. Now, unlike our other array methods, which had the function called one time for each item, the function for sort actually gets called with two individual items. So in this case, it gets called with two notes. When we're creating the sort function, or you look at any examples of someone using it, they typically call the first one A and the second one B. Both of these are going to be some object from the array we're sorting. So A could be this one, and B could be this one, for example. It's our job to look at A and B and figure out which one should come first. Depending on which one should come first, we return one of three values. If A should come first, we return -1. If A should come after B, so B should come first, we return 1. If both of them don't have their order changed, they're identical in order, for example, the two to-dos are already completed, then we could return 0, saying that the order doesn't need to be changed up. So we're going to end up returning one of those three values. The trickier part is to figure out how to figure out if one comes before or after another. When we're trying to figure out if one string comes before or after another string alphabetically, all we do is use the less than and greater than operators. So before we try to put that into the sort method, let's go ahead and just mess around with it up above. Console.log to print it. Is the string A before, using the less than operator, the string B? In this case, yes, A comes before B. If I were to run the script node notes.js, that's exactly what we would see. I get true showing up right here. Now we could also check, for example, if the string March should come before the string January. In this case, I would expect the result to be no. March should come after January since J comes first. If I rerun the file, that's exactly what we get. We get the Boolean false printing. The last thing to consider is that the capitalization is important. So does the lowercase a come before the capital A? And the answer is no. Our capital letters always come first. So in the end of the day, the result of this is going to be false. We're going to address that in our sort function by converting everything to lowercase before we create any comparisons. That's going to make sure that if we did have a uppercase h and a lowercase a, for example, the A would come first, even though it's a lowercase letter and it should come second. I'm going to remove this console.log and we're actually going to put some of this into practice down below. First up, let's see if A should come before B. If it does, or if it should, we return -1. If. Our condition, our code. The code, super simple. Return -1. It's the comparison where the real work is done. So we're interested in looking at the title property for each, a.title. We could just as easily sort by the body, but I think the title makes a bit more sense. Now, as I just mentioned, we want to take case into account. So I'm going to convert it to lowercase. So we have this lowercase string, and we're going to compare it to the lowercase string, the title from B. Is A less than, right here, the same thing, b.title.to lowercase. If the result of this is true, we know that A should come before B. We return -1. All is well in the world. Now let's add an else if on. Else if. In here, we're going to determine if B should come before A. In that case, as I mentioned earlier, we want to return 1. Right here, what's that operator going to look like? Well, we are going to literally just swap out A for B and B for A. So b.title.to lowercase, is that less than a.title.to lowercase? If it is and B should come first, return 1. Now, the last case we talked about was returning 0. If A doesn't come before B and B doesn't come before A, that means they're identical. In that case, we could just set up a simple else clause and return 0, saying that their order is the same, so there's no need to adjust anything. Now, the sort method doesn't return much of anything. It actually sorts whatever array it's called on. So it's going to modify the notes array directly. That means if we were creating a sorts note function like we are here, there's no need to have a return value or do anything with the return value when you call it. For our purposes, that means down below, we just need to call the function and then print the notes array. I'm going to remove some of the sample code from previous lectures, and I'm going to comment out all of the calls to the other functions just to simplify the output. And down below, all we're going to do is call our sort method, sort notes. We're going to pass in the list of notes we're trying to sort. And then down below, we're going to print out the notes array and see how it changed, console.log notes. Notice I'm not doing anything with the sort notes return value. It's going to be undefined since we haven't explicitly returned anything from the function above. Down below, let's go ahead and save our file and rerun things. I'm going to clear the terminal output for clarity's sake, rerun the notes script, and what I get is H first, M second, and O third. It is indeed showing up correctly in alphabetical order. Up above, we note that this was not the order they were originally defined in. My next trip got swapped with habits. Now we can confirm that the case insensitivity was set up correctly by using a lowercase m, making sure that we still get the same order. If we didn't set up case insensitivity, all of our uppercase letters would come first, meaning that my next trip would actually show up last. But since we did take the case into account by converting everything to lowercase, I would expect the exact same order. Habits first, my next trip second, and office modification third. And there we have it. We now have a way to sort our notes into something that makes a bit more sense. Now we might have multiple sorting functions for our application. Imagine we have a complex application. Maybe we want to sort by the title. Maybe we want to sort by the last time the note was modified or when it was created. There are all sorts of various criteria that could make sense for your application. For this one though, it makes sense to sort by the title. Now that we have a bit of experience with sort, you're going to use the sort method to sort our to-do array. Now with the to-dos, we're not going to sort by the text. We're actually going to completely ignore the text when it comes to sorting. Instead, we're going to sort by the completed properties. We're going to put all of our uncompleted to-dos up top and all of the ones that have been completed at the bottom of the list. This is probably what we would do if we were to create a real to-do application. It doesn't make any sense to have completed things up at the top. As always, I'll give you the usage for what we're going to create so we can make sure we're at least on the same page with that. Right here, I'm going to comment out the only other function call we have, and we're going to add a new one into the mix. That is going to be something along the lines of sort, not short, sort to-dos. We'll pass in our list of to-dos and then we'll print them. So console.log to-dos. It's going to be up to you to actually define and fill out the sort to-dos function. Now, I'm not going to give you a lot of hints with this one, even though this one is going to be a little trickier. The general structure is going to be exactly the same as what we saw over here. The only real difference is how do we figure out if one comes before another. That's pretty much all that needs to change. So I want you to think about two to-dos. What makes one come before another? One comes before another if one is completed and the other isn't completed. The one that isn't completed comes first. Based off of just that information, I'd like you to give this one an honest try. And remember, it's okay if you get stuck. We're in the learning phase, not the perfection phase. If this was a job interview, you'd want to make sure that you nailed the question and it worked correctly the first time before you sent it off. For us, as we're learning and exploring, it's okay to make mistakes, try things out different ways, and fall short. That is just fine. All I ask is that you do try to use what you've learned to solve the problem and look back on previous resources if you get stuck. Take some time to try to sort the to-dos and then actually run the code to make sure it works. We should see the ones with a completed value of false, like this one and this one, up top, and the ones with a completed value of true should be down below. Pause the video, knock this out. When you're done, come back and click play. All right, I know that one was a bit trickier, but the goal of this course is to make sure that when it's over, you can actually write JavaScript code. And the only way to make sure that happens is to get you to write JavaScript code during the course. Down below, we're going to kick things off by creating that sort to-dos function. Const sort to-dos. And it'll actually stay scrolled up so we can see the data we're working with. It's going to equal a function that takes in a set of to-dos. And what we're going to do is just call to-dos dot, and right here, we're going to be using the sort function. So sort is going to allow us to specify the order we want to sort things. I'm going to call it with a function since we're not working with a simpler data type like an array of strings. With an array of objects, sort doesn't know what to do unless you tell it what to do. We're going to define our two arguments, a and b. This function is going to get called with both of those. It's our job to tell the function which one comes first by returning -1 if a comes first, 1 if b comes first, and 0 if they're the same. In here, that means we need to set up a series of if statements. Well, actually just one if statement, but it needs an else if and an else clause, just like we had before. So if, what are we going to look for here? We're going to return -1, which means we only want this condition to be true if A should come before B. That means A isn't completed and B is completed. So right here, A dot completed equals false, and using our logical and operator, b dot completed equals to true. Now, as I mentioned before, when we're working with Boolean values, we typically don't need the equality operator since we already have a Boolean. So this right here is identical to this right here. We already have b.completed being true if it is true. Now, for this, we can't just remove the equality operator and false, because now we actually have the opposite of what we want. Here we're checking if A was completed. We want to check if A wasn't completed, so logical not is going to fix that. It's okay if your conditional was a little bit different than mine. Down below we return -1, and now we can move on to our else if. Else if. In this one, we are going to end up checking if B should come before A. So in the end of the day, we're going to be returning 1 for that. Inside of here, what's the goal? The goal is to check if b.completed is false. So I'm going to flip the value. Because remember, we want this to run, which means it needs to actually be true for the condition to pass. Then we use the logical and operator. We also want to make sure that a.completed is true. It actually is completed. If both of those are true, then that means B comes before A. Last up, else. If A doesn't come before B and B doesn't come before A, then their order doesn't need to be changed and we can just return 0 for that. And there we have it. This is all we needed to do for the sort to-dos function. We're going to be using a lot of Boolean logic throughout the course in ways like this, so if it's not quite clear or intuitive just yet, I promise that as we practice and write more code using Boolean logic like this, it'll be a little more intuitive. Let's go ahead and run the script though and make sure that what we have so far is actually getting the job done. I am going to clear the terminal output and use node to do.js to test my work. Right here, I have order cat food and do work, both with completed values of false. At the bottom, I have 3 to-dos with the completed value of true: clean kitchen, buy food, and exercise. And that is correct, and it's also not the order we started off in. Previously, I did have do work, which hasn't been completed near the bottom of the list. That did successfully get pushed up to the correct position. So there we have it. We now know how to sort arrays, and that wraps up a lot of the basic things we're going to be doing with arrays. Sure, there are a few others we'll explore throughout the course, but we now have a great understanding of the fundamentals of working with arrays of objects, which is so essential when we're modeling real applications because, as I mentioned before, we can add multiple properties on, giving us a more real-world model of the thing we're trying to model, whether it's a to-do, a product on our e-commerce store, or an email. Now that we have this in place, we're going to move on to the next and final video for the section where you're going to be taking our expense manager, which was originally a very simple application, and you're going to be adding a bit more complexity to it using what we've learned in this section. I'm super excited to get to that. Let's jump right in.